stage, and as they make their way to the stage, we've got a bit of light entertainment for you. But don't worry, it's not going to be singing or dancing. After this forward-looking keynote, we would like to take you on a nostalgia trip. Join us as we travel back in time to 1987 and see how translation was done at the European Commission then.
Here, as elsewhere, computers are gaining ground. They are useful tools for the translator and leave him free to concentrate on the part of his work where his skill is most needed. Word processors are now commonplace in the translation divisions. Soon, every translator will be able to correct and change his text in the twinkling of an eye and transmit it to the requesting department at the touch of a button. And then there is machine translation, which may one day bring about a real revolution. The translation service is currently experimenting with Systran, a computer-assisted translation system. The computer proposes translation modules, and the translator makes appropriate corrections. The Commission is also cooperating on the Eurotra project, an advanced automatic translation system which will be able to deal with all the 72 possible combinations of community languages. All these advanced technological tools, including word processing, will be integrated into the Sizzling system. All units will have terminals linked to a central computer and will be able to communicate with each other as well as with other respondents, such as Systran and the Eurodicotom database, requesting departments, the Commission's documentary databases, and indeed databases outside the Commission.
How about that?
Now and then, amazing. You could just tweak it and it would work just as well about today, right? Translation is still communication.
Tweak it a bit, leave him free, the translator. Inclusive language, anyone? Anyway, a fun fact, and another sign of the times. The full video is actually 12 minutes long, which was considered short and snappy back in the 80s.
And you can find the link to the full video under DDT History on the platform. You go to Home, and then you go to Visit Our Expo. So we've had a bit about the future, we've had a bit about the past, so how about a bit of here and now? Our first panel. Can I invite you to stay to the stage? I have the honor to chair this panel, and it is called Promoting Language Services and the Translation Profession. And before I introduce the panel members and get started debating, we do have another little Slido poll, and don't worry about it, it's just for a bit of light fun. So could we have that, please? Well, I can sit here. So, I am now joined here on stage by, I will introduce my panel members, by Catherine Way, recently retired from the University of Granada, but she remains linked to the university where she worked for 32 years as Associate Professor of Translation. Her research interests are legal translation, directionality, the translation profession, translation training, and action research.
Delighted to be here.
And we have Adrian Probst, a Swiss native German translator, freelancer, language consultant, and content creator for the Freelancerverse YouTube channel with weekly videos on translation, freelancing, and languages.
Merci Anna, schön, dass ich da sein.
And my colleague Emma Hartkamp, language officer at the European Commission at the representation in the Netherlands. She has a background as conference interpreter, European Parliament translator, and advisor to the Director for Translation at the European Parliament.
Wat fantastisch om hier vanmiddag te zijn.
And finally, welcome also to Carlos Laordan Tovar, who is mixing academic and business life and has done so for over 20 years in 10 different countries and splits his time between lecturing at the University of Bologna, giving training at Istrad and Tragora Formación, and is also a freelance language consultant and localizer. And I would like to start by giving you the floor.
Muchas gracias.
So you can set the scene for us. What are the tendencies for when it comes to the attractiveness of the language industry, from the point of young people joining and or not the industry, but also the clients?
Thank you very much. Well, thanks to the European Commission for having me, having us. Thanks to the European Commission for having the idea of printing this both sides, so I don't spend 90% of the networking time just switching this over and over. And it was really, really enlightening having Katia as a keynote speaker and having some time for, I cannot remember the name of the young woman that was studying translation. It was to set the tone. It's an interesting time because we have been hearing so much about technology, so much about all the AI hype, right? It's taken over the world by storm, apparently. It's going to be all the fuss about it. Luckily for us, I think that the hype is now starting to slightly and slowly washing away. So now it's important, it's very, very important that now in the midst of this technology storm, that we remember that we, the people, the translators and humans are at the center of the process and are the end users and are the engine that feeds the machine that uses translation. And that's something that I find that in many industry events as well, and in many industry forums, this is taking a very side place in it, and it should still be central. Right now, luckily, we're starting to talk back about the human role that we have in this industry. Remember, for those who have been for many years in the industry, you will remember that many years ago, CAT tools were going to take away all our jobs. After that, it was statistical-based machine translation. After that, it was neural machine translation. Now it's artificial intelligence, which is actually part of the neural machine translation. And all those technologies are overlapped and interconnected. It's not that they are separate rooms. But it is something, it's extremely important to remember that we are still in control of it, no matter the hype. Of course, there will be a lot of this discussion is going to be driven by those with an economical financial interest in it. But we still need to remember that after the hype is off away and we start to dig into the real value of it, we need to come to terms with the role we still play even today, even if all the conversation seems to be focused on technology, that there's still us who are responsible for delivering the material, for delivering the quality.
Oh, thank you very much. And let's go to Emma. A big part of your work is to promote a translation and interpretation as a profession, as a career. And you are in contact not only with university students, but also secondary school students. So would you say that young people in the Netherlands are interested in making languages their career? And what is the focus in your work to attract them to this?
It's a very good question, especially for my country, because I must be honest. Languages are not an attractive sector for young people, and language studies are having a very hard time in the Netherlands now. It's because parents and teachers tend to present the studies as not very profitable. They think they can't earn a living with it, and it's a bit of a dusty image because young people think they will become a teacher or a translator, and they don't know what translator means, of course. It's this idea of how it was 50 years ago. Translation studies do a little bit better. It's quite stable now. We have in our EMT masters, say, between 20-30 students per year. That's quite good for the Netherlands. And then we have a bachelor in translation, it's more practical translation school, where they have about almost 100 students per year. So that's not bad. Also taking into consideration that in the Netherlands, translation and interpretation have never been very visible professions, because the Dutch tend to think that they speak their languages and they don't need these professionals. And then, of course, Google Translate and generative AI do not make things any better. But I think when you ask me about the focus I use to present the profession, I think I found an entry to the mind of the young people, because I really feel that AI and IT in general do offer new angles, new opportunities to promote the profession and to also attract other people. Because I think, of course, translation studies and translation programs in an excellent way prepare young people for the profession, but you can also find them somewhere else. Huh? You can also go and speak about what their intersections are with other fields of expertise and study fields, and then you have almost it's a very topical way of presenting it, because then you can explain that if you connect AI and languages, you can speak about language equality in a digital age, you can speak about disinformation and explain that if we do not understand how generative AI is functioning, we don't understand where misinformation is coming from, and if you do understand it, you can contribute to lessening it and to work on the machines in order for them to get better and to produce less hallucinations. And then eyes tend to get open and people tend to think that it's actually very relevant and important to work on all this. And I then hope that people will start studying languages and translation and discover that actually translation is a super interesting and innovative profession. I even wrote a module, an educational module on AI and MT to show actually what you have to do as a student, what you have to know in order to use the machines, and then what you have to do with the output in order to get really nice results. And then I hope that this is actually the translation profession now.
Okay, so you present AI not as a threat, but as it's a way of attracting people to the
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Catherine. So when you look back 30 years ago, I mean, do you recognize anything of this?
We were talking earlier about interpreting when you had no mobile phone, no internet, nothing, and very rarely had any information. I mean, it was just totally different world. And it seems that we keep living through sort of, it's cyclic, you know, computers and carbon copy, typewriters and carbon copy paper. And then, oh God, computers, and then databases, and then terminology, and, you know, everything was going to take our jobs away. But, I mean, the translation industry has increased 140%, I think they were saying the other day, in the whole world. So I think it's just, every time there's a new tool, and I know AI is quite different and is going to be perhaps more important, we just simply have to learn how to use it to our best benefit for our clients. But the human element is not going to disappear. Radiologists recently looked at this because AI was actually being used to avoid the lack of number of radiologists in the UK. But they said, okay, it can detect a lot of things, but it can't always exactly make sure that the diagnosis is this or that. There was a very famous, or the clip I use a lot with the students, of a gentleman in his car in the 1960s. It's an old Spanish film. And his car breaks down. And he calls a mechanic who comes on a little scooter. And so he says, oh, you know, try, won't work, try again. And he just sort of tightens something with a screwdriver. And the guy says, how much is that? He says, well, 50 euros. He said, 50 euros for tightening a screw? No, it's €1 for tightening the screw, 49 for knowing which screw to actually tighten. So that's where the translators are. Or we'll talk about the name and the label as well. You know, I've discussed this in legal translation quite a lot. I don't like using language all the time because I think that helps doesn't help us to show our role in society, because translators do so much more. Pre-editing, post-editing, cultural advising or consultation. And AI will be a tool that will help us in that. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And I think our previous speaker said that universities lag behind. You know, well, There are constraints, a lot of constraints on training that we'll go into a little later, I think. But we do our very best to keep up and even ahead of many things as well.
And you have a steady stream of translation students coming to university. You don't have...
No, I mean, we have an enormous number of students. There are about 26, 27 faculties in Spain. I think it's because they weren't interested in languages in the traditional philology departments that were mainly to become, you know, language teachers. They're trying to reabsorb us now because we have so much success. But I mean, you know, on a master's course that was 30 students, we now have to have 60 places and like 300 or 400 applications. And in the undergraduate, we have an intake of between the 4 A languages, 300 or 400 a year. You know, it's.
Okay. How's that for optimism about the
It's the number one, it's the highest cutoff mark to get into university. It's usually medicine or translation in Granada is the highest in Spain.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let's go to Adrian. As a translation influencer, what are the aspects of the profession that we should focus on to attract new colleagues? And do you have some feedback from your followers? You know, what they enjoy with the profession?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, I always have a tendency to push back a bit when someone calls me an influencer. I don't know. I have this weird, it has this weird connotation of like consumerism behind it. But I guess I have to say, like, I do get messages from people that I did influence them to start in the language industry and start their own business. Some of them in the room, some of them at home watching. So I guess if that's the influence, then that's nice. Yeah, I mean, I get so much feedback from them. The number one thing is if you go into this industry, then obviously you love working with languages and you learn so much every day because I mean, not only about languages but also about the content that you're working on. And that is also the main thing for me. I mean, I love obsessing about these little like phrases, figure of speeches, etymologies of work. Just this week, actually, I learned about mortgage. I didn't know that this is from the old French of mort for death and gage for pledge, right? Like it's literally a death pledge. So that was interesting. Luckily, not for the borrower. It's more about, you know, when the money is paid, the pledge is dead.
And having a pub,
right?
And 11 because everybody's just looking at you like, okay, come on.
That's exactly why I like to meet with other translators to talk about this stuff. Yeah. So yeah, and then I do a lot of academic proofreading and editing of master thesis, bachelor thesis, and there I learned so much about different aspects, like different contents. Just this year I learned probably all there is to know about ethics of prostitution in Switzerland. I didn't think I would learn about that this year, but I did. So. And actually, there is something that maybe Catherine and Emma can talk about later, because when I do these theses nowadays, it's so weird. Usually if someone wants to pay this amount to me, then they know that they are not that good in spelling, maybe, you know. So it would be like pages of horrible spelling, I'm correcting everything, and then suddenly a perfect paragraph. Just no references, nothing, just perfectly written, and then I add a little comment. Did you really write this? So I don't know how universities deal with that stuff now, because it's probably generated, so it's original, but it's not their words.
Plagiarism
right?
programs, so you can put them through.
Is it plagiarism if it's generated by an AI?
If it's been found on the internet, it's considered plagiarism if you don't quote the source.
So it wouldn't be found, I guess.
Possibly.
So yeah, I always
I've seen
put a
people
little
detecting
annotation.
AI, yes.
Yeah.
But you always see that when there's a perfect paragraph suddenly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so a learning mind. The translators and the interpreters already have a learning mind. So
Definitely,
that's good news. Emma, you mentioned this machine translation project. We're trying to put the human in the focus, but could you tell us a little bit more about this Dutch machine translation literacy project?
Yes, of course. It's a very interesting project because actually it's a project which focuses on machine translation, the use of machine translation by other professionals than translation professionals or linguistic professionals, and it focuses on higher education. So actually the goal of the researchers is to help teachers in higher education, teachers in fields like legal studies or medical studies, the aim of the project is to teach these teachers, to make them conscious of the importance of a critical use of MT, and then to give them tools and materials to work with their students on how do you use MT in a critical way, what you need to know of MT in order to understand what's coming out. And it's very good. They have a very good methodology, I think, because they start off with they've identified the risks. So, for example, they explain that we all know the risks of the instructions for the use of a grass cutter or a medicine. We know what risks there are when you've used MT to translate these kind of instructions, but people don't always realize that, for example, legal professionals might use it in an asylum procedure, and that can lead to procedural mistakes. So they identify the risks, and then they also collected a lot of typical use cases in all these professions, and working on these use cases, they develop materials to work on it and to learn students in other professions and and linguistic professions how to use it. So I think it's important because it makes also the society conscious of the limits. And it's not, we think it's evident, but no, people tend to trust MT quite a lot.
Yeah, I tested it actually ahead of this panel, and I thought it was really useful. It's something that could be actually good for almost everybody to have that kind of questions to make you think a little bit about AI, about machine translation. So, and Kathy, apart from technical skills, how do we best equip translation students for the outside world?
Well, as somebody from SDL told me a long time ago, please just teach them to translate. Because we can teach them the tools in 3 days. So obviously we introduce them to all the different tools. You know, it can't just be only one company normally. But they need to be able to detect, identify, have different strategies to solve translation problems, work collaboratively, project manage, be able to find resources with criteria and know when something is reliable or not. So, you know, if we just go deep straight away, you know, right, machine translation, just put, you know, I had a student on the MA who just, you know, put it into machine translation to try those without any pre-translation analysis, without any pre-editing. And again, pre-editing, post-editing, revising, they can't do that if they don't know how to translate and if they do not have criteria. So those are the fundamental things. And also we always offer them lots of profiles because translators or translators who've been trained actually have so many different competencies that they can use in so many different jobs. It's not just translating and interpreting. They're doing all sorts of things. Project management for anti-terrorism projects in NATO, you know, because they learned how to project manage very well whilst they were learning to translate. So again, showing them this whole profile may attract more people. It's not just languages. It's not just translating and interpreting. And just to come back to something that Emma said, I mentioned earlier that in the US, if Alan Melby can probably correct me if I'm wrong, recently they've been using AI for immigration application translations. And they found that up to 40% had been rejected due to errors in the translations. Things like translating the person's name. Julio Cortez was July Court, and all sorts of other things, which I know you can, you know, fix, but are they aware, or the people who are using it aware of how they can do that? And so that's very serious. I mean, that's changing people's lives. If
I may react, because it's very interesting what you're saying, and you say that I completely agree that you can learn how to use the tools in 3 days, but don't you think that students also have to learn not only how to use them, but how they function, how they work? Because then you can identify also the mistakes and you know where they're coming from.
Yes, they do have courses on that. But I mean, again, something that was said earlier, and people often attack trainers and the universities. There is a limited amount of time and an awful lot to teach them. Now, we're quite lucky in that their language skills are usually quite high, at least in their B languages and their A languages. But I know other people have said to me, you know, our students are coming out in Belfast recently talking to UK trainers. You know, their levels are not very high when they come in, so we can't really progress very far. So, yes, they do. But first learn to translate. I think it was Brian Harris said, if you can't translate with paper and pens and pen, you can't translate.
That's true.
So, yeah, I would think that they need to know how to translate. And as I mentioned, with tests, when they've written a translation test with paper and pen, they often get better marks than when they're doing it with the computer. Because they use their internalized strategies, and they are more confident in what they're doing. You know, the self-efficacy, we teach them self-efficacy, selling yourself, the value of the profession. You've got so many things to teach them in so little time. So yeah, we do, they are introduced to the programs, but again, just they told me give them advanced IT skills and some notion. And then they go on to the MA and they have more, then they specialize more if they want to, you know, or they can go on to do other courses.
Yeah, I think I'm going to link that to the young woman who is a translation student. Can you raise your hand? She made a very interesting point about the importance of beyond using CAT tools, because they are learning how to use CAT tools, but they also need to learn how to translate. Because it's not only, I mean, if you develop a good mastery of a CAT tool, of any tool, artificial intelligence, call it CAT tools, call it whatever, and you deliver a product, but you are not aware of how to provide the best possible quality because you have not translated, you do not understand the ins and outs of translation, the ins and outs of language. The only way to do that is to learn to translate a lot. You need to practice a lot. You need to translate. You need to read. You need to check your translations, to check how valuable your translation is. Was the client, does it have the intended effect? Does it work? Does it not work? That's beyond the tool. The tool will never be able to tell you beyond an automated QA whether something works or not. And it can be a frustrating process. But the output you provide, if the baseline is good, and you already know what you're delivering, and you deliver good material, the baseline for the end user, the general public, they will demand quality. If they rely on a baseline written by a known post-edited, by an unchecked output, machine output, the general public are going to believe that that's right. So they are going to dumb down the corpus, the general corpus. And that's something that we need to fix from the root. And that's a potential issue that is started to show. The quality, the average quality of many texts out there are declining. Quality is declining in some texts because it's an edited machine output. And we need to stress the importance of, we are always filling our mouths with the added value. What's that added value? The value is the ultimate quality that we can devise to put on a text. A machine cannot do that. A machine cannot decide whether, beyond statistics, whether an option fits better context, a given context, a communicative situation, scenario. We do, only we do, and only by practicing a lot and stressing in any work context, be it as trainees, working with a language service provider, working with end clients, we must highlight this all the time. We must let the world know that this is impacting them directly. And I mean, that's something that we need to worry about, but in a healthy way. Not just saying, okay, just adopting a defeating tone. And saying, okay, no, there's nothing to do. I do not like to use to use the sentence, okay, machine translation or artificial intelligence is here to stay, and that's right. It's here to stay because it's going to spread. I mean, all the hype is because it's going to impact every sector of human activity. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to follow the rules set by those who have a financial interest in it. Again, the problem is not technology in itself. The problem is how financial powers can do to make most advantages for a few. And we have a say in that. And that's something we need to think about.
Okay, thank you very much. So Adrian, apart from learning how to translate and do it with pen and paper, any more particular tricks that you recommend on YouTube for people to future-proof themselves in this profession?
Yeah, I do talk about that quite a lot, and it's funny. Like whenever I put the keyword "future" in the title, for sure the video is soaring to the top, and it kind of shows that there is a need for reassurance, and also the question from the student before, it shows that there is anxiety about the future. So I do try to work on that a lot, but it's also very, like I try to be aware not to use it too often because it's so sensitive, right? And I do a lot of research for these videos to give my honest opinion, my best opinion. And recently I was invited by pros.com to talk about this exactly at one of their conferences. And there I gave basically my top 10 tips on how to future-proof your career. And the top 3 that I thought of was embracing technology, mastering cultural awareness, and pushing digital content, so content creation. And with the technology aspect, of course, I'm talking translation technology, but I think we will hear a lot at the forum about that, so I'm leaving that to the experts. But I'm also meaning more thinking about how you can incorporate technology into your daily life, into your daily activities. Like, for example, in my market research now, I use a lot of technology. I use tools like Google Trend, Google Alert, Hootsuite is a good one, and Mention and Keyword Tracker. So all of these things are tools that you can readily use. Most of them are free, and they alleviate so much time because I don't have to actually spend too much time out of my working day to do market research in my specializations, but I get all the relevant stuff directly into my inbox, and I really read what is relevant to me, right? And that things like this can alleviate a lot of stress because you want to work on stuff that is paid. The cultural awareness part is just you have to be a mediator. Carlos said it right. Like, if there is something that a machine can't do better than humans, then it's knowing which phrases have which cultural, historical, societal connotations. That's where you can also potentially collaborate with your client before the content creation. That is something I'm doing now. So that's nothing to do with translation. I'm advising the client before they write the copy how they should how they should write to reach the Swiss audience how they want it. And then with the content creation, you need to build a brand around what you're doing. I'm convinced of that you don't need to show your face on screen or be up here on stage. That's something else. Every time, like the night before I do something like this, I'm asking myself, why am I doing this? But then I realize like there is so much potential and so much growth in that, and it has helped me immensely in finding. It has become almost easy to reach out to find new clients because you're already like showing your credibility. You're already proven, and it often happens now that the client comes to me and they know more about me than I know about them, and then it creates a whole different dynamic, right? Because suddenly you are in the expert seat. It's like when you reach out to a plumber or a doctor or something, you want their services, right? So that puts me in a position where I can charge my rates, and it's just a much nicer collaboration than on some platforms where you're just bidding to be one of the highest bidder, and then it's still low. So that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. Carlos, do you have something to add when it comes to how to convince prospective clients?
We always end up talking about plumbers here, and there's a reason for that, because they are very, very good, way better than translators at advertising and showing their value. Where you need to hire a plumber, or you need to have an electrician. I find that most translators, average translators, and I mean average translators. I remember from Ken Nielsen this year actually at ELIA. He said a very, very smart thing, saying that people willing to attend these translation events are the elite of translators. You are the elite of translators because you are already showing up and you are ready to confront ourselves. But there are many, many other translators who are too shy to come here for different reasons. But the average translator finds a hard time trying to sell, even among friends, even among acquaintances. We do not really know how to start. Okay, it's complicated, but we cannot be the only job that, Mom, it's complicated, is to define what I do for a living. It shouldn't be that hard. Just imagine yourselves in a casual dinner, just having, I don't know, with your basketball friends or your kids' friends, and you're having a conversation with some parents, and someone just casually tells you, oh, what do you do for a living? You say, okay, I'm a translator. And this translator, and the guy has no way to know. He works in a completely different world. Say, oh, that's good. I'm a software developer, or I'm a mechanic or whatever. And when I need to have something translated, I occasionally use Google Translate. We tend to avoid that kind of confrontation, but I perceive that the reason is that we do not actually know how to properly define what we do. And that's a mental exercise for you all, to think about how would you react in those situations. I mean, getting offended, it's going to take you nowhere.
Yeah.
Getting just to fight back and say, okay, he didn't even try to offend you, probably because he knows nothing about what we do, about how translation consists in.
I think it's really about understanding where this mindset of the person you're speaking with comes from. So understanding why this person thinks Google is so good and why he uses it, and then have the expertise to comment on it and to explain that we understand that we can actually use it and that it's super useful. But so and also link in on societal issues. So speak the language of the people you're speaking to and link our profession to that, because I really think that our profession has become more relevant than ever with crisis interpretation and translation, with what I said, language equality in a digital age. I mean, there's so many subjects in which suddenly translators are becoming builders of the machines and of AI, but then explain that to your interlocutor, to your cafe partner.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add there, I think the last time I was here in the DGT, I talked about being proactive. Our previous speaker said about changing things. And so very often society doesn't know what we do, or they have a very false idea of what we do. I remember somebody saying, oh, you just sit in the library with dictionaries. And I was saying, yeah, sure. 30 years ago, 40 years ago maybe. But there are many ways of being proactive, and I discussed that with the translators, I think, when I was here, about, people don't know what our problem is. We're very often in a privileged situation. So when you said I do action research, there we've done things like, I was just with somebody who's a translator-interpreter in the Spanish Parliament. In her final dissertation, we found problems where Schengen visa applications had parts that were vital and were not translated. And we went to the ministry and we told them about it, and we told the European Union, and they got a fine, and then they changed it. And we've just seen that now in the new translations from other languages, they've done the same. So we will again do something to try and make a change in society. The other thing is intra-university projects with other degrees. There are joint degrees now, translation and tourism, translation and law, again, but
translation and plumbing.
No, we don't have a plumbing faculty at the moment, yeah, but we are doing it with others. But putting translation students to work with law students, because we tried sort of getting to the top and convincing judges about how important translation is. It's very hard. So 200 law students, put them to work with translators. 99% said they would use a lawyer with languages before, and 100% changed their mind after the project. So you've got 200 new lawyers are out there who will say, oh no, call a translator. We've done it now with the medicine faculty and the science faculty as well. So, making them see the value, which we often are very shy about, I think.
Yeah. That's an excellent project. Yeah, I think the difference with the plumber is that everyone knows when they need a plumber. But yes, but it's not always obvious to people that they need some kind of language expert. They know it when they need a text in a foreign language that they don't master. But localization, cultural awareness, that has always been part of the job. But how do do we need to specify this to make it visible to clients that there are other aspects, or that this is actually part of translation?
Actually, on our MA course, when we have I gave the sessions on the profession, there were some people who set up a co-working, translation sort of office, and I said, go and look at, the 5-star hotel in this city. What's their webpage like? It was terrible in English, because somebody working there who'd been in London for, 6 months had translated it. So I sort of helped them to find resource articles from The Economist and other places on how expensive a poor translation can be for a business, and giving them ideas, and then send them out with a revised version and offer their services. And now they have them on, working for them constantly. Being proactive again, being a cultural consultant as well. I had a gentleman years and years ago who wanted to sell crisps that he was making in Spain in the UK, way before the European Union, of Spain being in the European Union. And on the packet of crisps, there's like an explosion, sign, and then it said the sound for an explosion, boom, was B-U-M. Now, this was his trademark. And so I explained to him that if he tried to sell bum crisps in the UK, it wouldn't be good business. Oh, he was so delighted. He told the whole Chamber of Commerce how wonderful a translator was. So, you know, because he wouldn't have sold them, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and tell these stories about, indeed, that's transcreation. That's what we now call, and it can be all about one word. And there's also this famous example, I think it was, well, one of these famous football shoes producers, and they wanted to launch one of their new shoe models in Nigeria, I think it was. But then they didn't ask a language consultant what colors to use, and they unfortunately put the colors of the flag of Nigeria, and of course you cannot walk on a flag. So they had this brand had to take back I don't know how many millions of shoes. So explain this to big brands that they better consult a language consultant, cultural consultant. Yeah.
Yeah. Later on, you can Google what happened when Amazon tried or launched in Sweden. I will not quote the examples from stage because it's not appropriate. This is a family event. But anyway, so Adrian, you will recognize this. This is built on a real question that you got. So in not too long a time, it's Christmas and it's New Year's, and we will be seated around the table with our loved ones, and then maybe your aunt tells you that you shouldn't become a translator because the translation industry is dead. So what do you suggest? What should
yeah, someone asked me that I do these Q&A videos, and someone asked me that, and I found it quite funny, but also I could relate a lot. And this has been for years like this, right? But I remember in 2011 is when I decided to study translation, and my dad said the same thing. So it was just a different perpetrator, kind of, because he said, everyone speaks English, this is not needed. And now it's like the AI does it. So it doesn't really matter whether, you know, like Gary from marketing translated it or an AI. You probably have more or less the same problems with in the end if you don't consult a professional translator. But yeah, I told this person that it's definitely not a dead industry. So first of all, you can come back to your aunt at Christmas, tell her, no, it's not. It's growing. It's very much growing. By 2028, it's prospected to be $100 billion industry. So the language industry is growing. I am aware, and I do realize that this is not representative of what's happening in the freelance translation market. A lot of people are dropping out because they are not receiving jobs anymore, and I am aware. I talk to a lot of people that this happens to. What it comes down to in the end is probably, again, adapting. We talk about this all the time, right? I don't have this very emotional connection to the profession of translator that other people have, and I guess if you have that, it can be a bit tricky to let go of these things if you're just very strict on yourself. You know, I am what I am. I have been doing this for 10, 15 years, and you're not able or willing to change anymore, then it's going to be hard. For me, it's no problem. I love change, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm okay with adapting, not only what I do, but also how I do it. Especially pricing is now something I'm really rethinking in my business, trying to go away from word pricing towards project, towards retainer prices as well. It never stops, but that's also the cool thing when you have a business, right? You are in the driver's seat. You decide what you change, when you change it. So yeah, I'm excited about what's coming, but I do see the fear in a lot of people.
Okay, you have a comment? Yes, and then?
No, I really agree with that. I mean, it's the matter of embracing change. I mean, changing is happening all the time. Every second, the world changes, the industry changes. Whenever there are thousands of factors, different factors is altering what we understand as translation industry, as language industry. So there's no denying that technology has a very big impact. And for those of us who rely on a more traditional business model, yes, okay, I've been doing this kind of translations, hundreds of translations for 30 years, so now it's too late for me. Okay, can respect that. And it doesn't necessarily imply that we all need to turn into post editors or into AI feeders, but we really need to face the situation, and we really need to make an open discussion about it, an honest discussion involving freelancers, involving language service providers who are not against what many freelancers know are not the ultimate evil, okay? On the other hand, they have different kinds of different pressures coming up, and those pressures that the language service providers and translation agencies are facing are having a direct impact on us. So we better collaborate with them, helping them and ourselves understand what's at stake here. So, I mean, it's completely useless to make a frontal, to refuse to touch, to get even close to technology, because that's not going to change the situation. Having a say in it, just discussing it with the people who are relevant, with the people who might even help us make a decision. Associations, translation associations, do associate, do become a member of your local international associations. Your voice alone is worth very little, but if many of people like you think alike, your voice grows stronger. Another are initiatives from freelancing associations, from industry associations with companies. And I'd like to mention one initiative that an Italian company, it's called Creative Words. We have a representative, we have the CEO around. They are trying to understand where artificial intelligence is driving us by asking freelancers. They are asking, they also have to face end clients, and of course they also have to work with technology providers. These are part of the market, like it or not. But trying to understand it, you say, okay, why don't we try to create a seal of quality? Yes, trying to keep things, to keep tabs on the process, to keep things under control, and to guarantee that everybody is happy on the process. On every step of the process, there's somebody adding value to what technology provides, not only relying on this. And the only way to engage in those type of conversations is just by raising those topics here in this forum, in associations, in translation events, and among yourselves. That's the only way we can get a life out of this. We will, but we need to talk about it, even if it feels uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, speaking about change, what's in a name? That which we call a translator by any other name would be as sweet. Can we have the results of the Slido, and maybe the panel can have? No, there was a Slido question before with the options for what the translator could be called if it weren't called a translator. Yes, there. So I don't know if the panel would like to comment on that just before we take a few questions from the audience. No need to change. Yeah. Well, it wasn't the top. What do you say?
I'm actually happy to see this, because I really think that we should stick to a name which is still understandable. Because if we speak about already cultural diplomacy or whatever, just our clients won't understand it, and they will use the word. So I also speak with agencies who tell me that they get clients and they call them and they say, I would like to have transcreation. And then first discover and figure out what this client means by transcreation, and then you can start to discuss. So I think language specialist is not a bad choice, actually.
I have to disagree. I think that when we stick with something like language specialists, we're sticking with the word and the charging per word, and that idea that anyone who speaks a language can do what we do. So, I mean, translator's fine by me. I'm happy with translator, but again, there are other people who are charging now for consultancy for, as we were saying, as you were saying, working with the client before they create the content. So I've seen interlingual, cultural consultant, librarians became information architects, and there's all sorts of possibilities. That's true. Actually, that's their new name. But language for me is a problem, because it doesn't move us away from the language studies, only speaking a language and charging per word, which I think is something we need to move away from.
Adrian, do you have a...
I'm kind of in two minds. Like in a professional setting, I do market myself as a language specialist, but in an academic setting, I would wish to see translator in my degree, because I really like the idea of studying a profession and not just some theory, you know. So I think I would feel quite lost if I studied something like modern languages or German or English. So I was very happy to be able to study the profession of translator and to educate and form myself into this practitioner. So, but now I do market myself as a language specialist. So I'm not sure. There was a switch somewhere from going to university to professional life.
Okay, interesting. Now it's time for your questions. Do we have any question here from the room? To begin with, yes.
Yeah, name is Rudy Thierry. It's not a question. It's about that choice of name. I don't think that it matters much about which name you give it, as long as you don't change the content behind that name. And based on the discussion that the panel has had and also what we've heard before, I think we should indeed, as Catherine mentioned, move away from language, because language is a volatile thing. Quality is a volatile thing. Everybody has their own opinion about it. And I would suggest to move to something completely different, which is risk management, risk prevention. Everything that you've been talking about was about how do translators or language specialists avoid the errors of AI and other MTs. So think about it. It's all about risk management.
Yeah, in a way, that's I can see the point, and I can see also the point of just advertising ourselves as specialists, as language specialists. But I'm a bit of a romantic soul myself, and I would stick to the word translator because of its etymology. I love etymology. I guess that many of you have. Otherwise, you wouldn't have we wouldn't have be so many translators here. Even the profession evolves over time. A translator back in the 13th century has little to do with the way a translator in the 21st century works. But the essence, the core skills that needs to put into play are still the same. And to translate, if you look at the etymology, so the translatum, we build bridges, we connect two dots. Okay, so that's what we do. If we use language, professional, whatever, I think that nuance, that very important nuance, which is part of what many of us decided to become translators, would be lost. So even if what a teacher does nowadays has the essence, is exactly the same as what a teacher did in the 15th century, but right now teachers use a completely different tool set. Teachers do many, many more things. Sometimes it's unbearable, the amount of change they have to face, just like translators. But they still love to call themselves teachers because they love what they do. The essence of their mission. And our mission as translators is to build bridges. And that's what we do. That's what I love doing. And I will still love to call myself a translator, even if I do consulting, even if I do provide technology training or whatever. But in my heart, I'm still a translator.
Yeah. Could I just say something short? But in that case, we need to, we've done this in one of the Spanish associations, go out there and let people know what translators do. We've done guides for users on how to use a translator, how to use an interpreter. And if we don't sell ourselves, we're still lost, in this void.
But do not punch Aunt May in the Christmas dinner, anyway. Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So I love it when we discuss terminology that you really feel the passion. Maybe we should take one question from Slido, and then I see there are several hands in the room as well. So the top voted question: do you agree that to use the language technologies in the most efficient way, first you need to be able to translate without any technology? I think we touched upon this. So we can say yes, but any comment further?
Well, I think one remark I could make on this is I organized a workshop on how technologies can help also creative language professionals. So I won't say literary translators because, of course, part of my audience were literary translators, but also trans creators and people really working on creative solutions in their text. And these people, and I also experienced myself translating, is that if you don't have this, if you haven't made all these kilometers translating without the technology, you're not aware that your whole creative process is different when you're editing, post-editing your machine output. So it's for me, it's very interesting to see how differently I think and work with the output of machine compared to what my brain output would be. So that's why I think it's very important. But only for that comparison, I think if you decide to study languages or translation and you already have this linguistic feeling and the machine won't damage this, I think.
Okay. Thank you. What might be the last question would be here from the room. Yes?
Thank you. So my name is Clara and I'm here with University of Osijek. So my question would be mainly for Catherine and the other one for anyone who cares to answer. So you mentioned briefly that we should not charge per word. So what should be the unit of accounting and charging, and what would be your advice for it? And the other is, what would be a quantifiable value that businesses would understand and translators could accept? So what would be a quantifiable value that both parties could agree on? Thank you.
Right, I've discussed this before in other forums, and it's quite complicated. It's going to depend on the volume, on the types of projects, on the clients as well. But, for example, there's an awful lot of certified translation, legal translation that goes on in many countries. Now, when I went the other day to the garage to have my wheels changed, they tell me it's 35 euros for an hour of labor and that changing the wheels is 30 minutes. Now, if a novice does it, they may take 3/4 of an hour, but I will only be charged half an hour. And if somebody's an expert does it, well, they can probably do 2 cars' wheels within that time. The difference is that you are giving one unified price to the public, to the client. So for certain smaller documents, birth certificates, academic certificates, so on, or maybe translating an academic article of so many pages, could have more or less a set price. I know we're not allowed to set price because of competition law and so on, but the per words still cause problems. Now, that would be more difficult in other projects, but then again, some people are starting to charge for pre-editing or, advising them about problems in the text before, post-editing, formatting, and maybe they want you to do graphics. So how do we include all of those elements is another problem. Again, depending on the sector, depending on the client, depending on the types of texts. But the word, I think, is dragging us down, always.
And then the next question, I don't know if Adrian or what can you maybe repeat it or?
Yeah, sure. It was about the quantifiable value, and someone else who asked the question, it was like quality it can be abstract and depending what the client needs. So what's something that's quantifiable as a value that you can present to a business, to a client, and that you can both agree on? I mean, it can be monetarily, yes, but the examples that we heard, some of them seem extreme. So what's the average? What's something that we can, that's tangible to everyone involved?
Really hard to answer that, but I agree, I'm in line with Catherine here, because using a per word rating system, it forces you to justify everything that goes beyond the mere translation, per word translation. So if you are doing research, if you are adding a quick glossary to it, if you are spending time in communication, that's some additional value that the client would not be aware. If you give a round price like the electrician or the plumber does, then you do not need to justify. You know how to set your rates, you know how to set your price. You don't need to start justifying, because then I spent 17 minutes on just trying to find the right tool, and that tool cost me, I don't know, 50 euros, so then I need to start to start making some profit out of it, they do not care about that, probably. But if you start working with a client on a per word basis, then you will eventually need to justify any additional output. The added value you provide, you will need to justify it every time. And in the end, that is exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. So you better start just thinking, okay, I am the expert. I know what to charge. Okay? And there's
any 30-second comment from Adrian?
I mean, in the end, per word rate is just a label as well, right? Even if you charge by retainer or project-based, you can just divide it by the number of words and you have a per word rate again, right? It doesn't matter. The only difference is if you work with agencies, probably you will have a very hard time to get away from the word rate because that's just such an established system. But when you work with direct clients, they don't care about words and fuzzy matches and whatever. You are the expert, you charge what you charge. So don't even bring it up in negotiations. That's
what's a fuzzy match?
Yeah, that doesn't matter, right? So.
Okay, thank you very much. An applause to this first panel. Thank you very much. You. So, and that was all for the in-person program for today. And we can move over to the platform for online presentations or one-to-one virtual meetings. And